The church bells should have been ringing, but all Angela could hear was the deafening silence of 300 empty seats. She stood at the altar in her pristine white gown, watching the heavy doors at the back of a sanctuary. Deep in her heart, she already knew Elijah wasn't coming. 6 months earlier, everything had changed at the church retreat in Colorado's mountains. The moment she saw Elijah Knox across the campfire circle, something electric shot through her. Dark hair catching firelight, green eyes like emeralds, flannel shirt rolled up strong forearms. When he smiled during evening worship, Angela felt her carefully constructed world tilt. "I don't usually approach women at church events," he said later by the lake, sunset painting the sky gold and pink. "But something about you makes me want to break all my rules." His voice was warm honey. They talked until stars emerged, about faith, dreams, futures that felt suddenly possible. "I've been praying for someone like you my whole life," Elijah whispered as they walked back, fingers intertwined. "Someone who understands love isn't just a feeling. It's a choice you make every day." The courtship unfolded like a fairy tale. First date at an Italian restaurant where he pulled out her chair and insisted on grace. Weekly flowers, daisies her favorite, text messages that remembered how she liked her coffee. When she had rough days at Lincoln Elementary, he'd arrive with Chinese takeout and romantic comedies. Pastor Williams beamed whenever he saw them together. Young love blessed by God. It does this old heart good to see two faithful souls finding each other. 4 months later, back at the lake where they'd first talked, he proposed. The diamond caught sunset fire as he dropped to one knee. "Angela Blake, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife?" The ring was perfect, a solitaire that must have cost months of his construction salary. As applause erupted from other retreat participants, Angela pushed down a tiny voice whispering, "How can he afford this?" Everyone was so certain they were meant to be. Angela threw herself into wedding planning with methodical care. Venue, cakes, lavender bridesmaids' dresses, every detail perfect, just like their relationship. Except for small things that didn't quite add up.
The text arrived Tuesday morning while Angela reviewed lesson plans. "Ask your fiance about Rebecca. Ask him why he's still wearing his wedding ring on a chain around his neck." Angela stared until the words blurred. Rebecca? Elijah had never mentioned anyone named Rebecca. And a wedding ring? "Who is this?" she typed back. "Someone who cares about the truth. Check his truck. Look in the glove compartment." That evening at dinner, she watched him more carefully. Same warm smile, same gentle kiss, same easy conversation about the Morrison project. But now everything felt rehearsed, like dialogue from an overperformed play. While he was in the bathroom, Angela did something she'd never done, checked his phone. Everything seemed normal, but she noticed something odd. All his text conversations started 6 months ago, right when they'd met. Where were the older messages? Family, old friends, previous coworkers? His digital life had begun the moment he entered hers. The next morning, she called in sick and drove to his construction site. Her heart hammered as she found his blue pickup and used the spare key he'd given her for emergencies. Inside the glove compartment, beneath registration and napkins, her fingers found cold metal, a chain. Hanging from it, exactly as predicted, was a simple gold wedding band. The inscription inside read, "E and R forever, 6/12/19. E and R, Elijah and Rebecca, forever." 2019, only 4 years ago. Her phone buzzed. Now ask yourself, if he lied about this, what else has he lied about? Sunday service felt suffocating. Elijah's arm around her shoulders felt heavy. When Pastor Williams smiled at them during his sermon about trust and marriage, Angela gripped the pew edge to keep from screaming. After service, Elijah kept checking his watch, glancing toward the street with nervous energy she'd never seen. "I should get going," he said suddenly, interrupting Mrs. Baker mid-sentence. "Early day tomorrow." It was Sunday. Construction crews didn't work Mondays. "I'll walk you to your car," Angela offered. "Actually, I parked down the street. Crowded lot." Another smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I'll call you later." She watched him turn left instead of right, away from visitor parking, deeper into the residential area. Without deciding, she followed. 3 blocks from church, he stopped at a small yellow house with white shutters. He walked up the steps with confident familiarity, not like someone visiting a stranger. The door opened before he could knock. The woman who emerged was beautiful. Dark hair in a casual bun, effortless grace. When she threw her arms around his neck, he lifted her off the ground, spinning her like lovers in a movie. They disappeared inside together.
Angela remained crouched behind a hedge, mind reeling. This wasn't an angry ex-wife. This was a reunion of two people deeply in love. Her phone buzzed. Hard to watch, isn't it? But you needed to see with your own eyes. If you want the whole story, meet me at Murphy's Diner on 5th Street tomorrow at 6 p.m. Come alone. Don't tell anyone, not even your pastor, especially not your pastor. Why especially not Pastor Williams? A dark possibility formed. What if the pastor knew? What if he'd been part of this from the beginning? Jamie Parker had tired eyes that came from carrying secrets too heavy for one person. As she sat across from Angela in the diner, hands wrapped around untouched coffee, she looked like someone who'd been waiting months to tell the truth. I was Elijah's first victim, 3 years ago in Portland. Same story. Church retreat, whirlwind romance, perfect Christian gentleman. Angela's coffee turned bitter. Victim? He married me. Real marriage, real ceremony, real documents. I thought I was the luckiest woman alive. Jamie's hands trembled slightly. The marriage lasted 6 months, long enough for him to establish residency, build credit history. Then one day I came home and he was gone. Empty apartment, missing clothes, no explanation. But Rebecca? She's his business partner, not his wife. She recruits the marks, sets up scenarios, makes everything look convincing. They've been running this con for years. Angela felt sick. Con? Green card marriages. Elijah's Canadian. Expired visa. Rebecca finds lonely women in churches. Women who are faithful, trusting, desperate for love. Women who won't ask questions when a handsome stranger appears claiming to want a fresh start. The diner tilted around Angela. How do you know all this? I hired a private investigator. Took 2 years and most of my savings, but I tracked him down. And I discovered something that made my blood run cold. Jamie leaned forward, voice dropping to a whisper. Your pastor? Pastor Williams? He's been helping them. That's impossible. He's their inside man. Identifies targets, provides background information, establishes credibility. Think about it. How else would a stranger know exactly what to say to make you fall in love? How would he know your favorite flowers, your coffee order, your deepest desires? Angela's mind flashed your counseling sessions with Pastor Williams, confiding her loneliness, dreams of marriage, desire for a faithful man. He's been feeding them information about you for months. Every private conversation, every hope you've shared, it all gets passed to Elijah and Rebecca so they can craft the perfect performance. Angela felt like drowning. Why? What does Pastor Williams get? Money. $10,000 per successful marriage. You're not his first. At least 6 other women in 3 years, all faithful church members, all desperate for love, all destroyed when the truth came out. Angela thought about Mrs. Peterson, who'd left suddenly after a bad breakup. Sarah Kim, who'd moved away after a mysterious broken engagement. I have proof, Jamie said, producing a manila folder. Photos, financial records, marriage certificates. Elijah has been married to 4 different women in 5 years. Rebecca poses as his angry ex when they need to explain inconsistencies. Why tell me? Why not the police? I tried, but they're good at what they do. Technically legal marriages, properly filed divorces. By the time anyone realizes what happened, Elijah has disappeared and the trail goes cold. Authorities treat it as civil, not criminal. Jamie's expression hardened. But this time is different. Your wedding is the perfect opportunity to expose them, all, Elijah, Rebecca, and Pastor Williams, in front of the entire congregation. I need you to trust me and be strong enough to see this through. Angela felt like standing on a cliff's edge. Everything she'd believed was crumbling, but underneath shock and betrayal, something else grew. Cold, determined anger. What do you need me to do? Keep pretending everything's normal. Don't let them know you suspect anything. Continue wedding plans, keep meeting with Pastor Williams, keep acting like the loving, trusting fiancé they think you are. Angela thought about the other victims, women who deserve better than having their hearts shattered by predators. Okay, tell me what to do.
Wedding morning dawned gray and drizzly. Angela sat in the bridal suite watching her makeup artist while bridesmaids fluttered around like nervous butterflies. "You look absolutely radiant," gushed Lisa, her maid of honor, adjusting the veil. "Elijah's going to cry when he sees you." Angela smiled serenely, though she felt made of glass. One wrong touch might shatter her into pieces. "I hope so." The past 3 weeks had been the longest of her life. Following Jamie's instructions, she'd maintained a perfect bride-to-be facade, dress fittings, catering confirmations, enduring well-wishers telling her how lucky she was. Hardest were the counseling sessions with Pastor Williams, looking into his kind, grandfatherly face as he spoke about marriage sanctity and spousal trust, while knowing he was actively destroying her life. "Marriage is a sacred covenant," he'd said 2 days ago, hands folded peacefully. "It requires complete honesty, complete faith. When you say your vows, Angela, you'll be promising to trust Elijah with your heart, your future, your very soul." She nodded and smiled, playing the eager bride while rage burned like acid. But she'd held her tongue, knowing soon Pastor Williams would understand exactly what his betrayal had cost her. Now, as processional music began, Angela felt strange calm settling over her. For weeks, she'd feared breaking down, giving away the game. But now, with the moment finally here, she felt steady and sure. The sanctuary looked like a fairy tale. White flowers and ivy, 300 candles casting golden glow. Everyone she'd ever cared about filled the pews. At the altar, Pastor Williams stood with his Bible, smiling benevolently. But no groom beside him. Angela walked down the aisle alone, steps measured and deliberate. With each step, congregation murmurs grew louder. Where was Elijah? Had something happened? She reached the altar and turned to face 300 confused faces. Pastor Williams leaned toward her, expression concerned, but eyes cold and calculating. "Where's Elijah, my dear?" he asked loudly enough for front rows to hear. "I'm sure he'll be here any moment. Perhaps we should wait." Angela looked at him steadily, seeing him clearly for the first time. Not the kindly spiritual father she trusted, but a predator who'd sold her heart for $10,000. "Pastor Williams," she said, voice carrying clearly through hushed sanctuary, "I don't think Elijah is coming."
The silence following Angela's words was deafening. 300 people held their breath, waiting for explanation. Pastor Williams's face went pale. "Now, Angela," he said in his most soothing voice, "I'm sure there's been some misunderstanding. Elijah loves you deeply." "There was no misunderstanding," Angela interrupted, voice steady and clear. "Elijah isn't coming because Elijah Knox doesn't exist. At least, not the man I thought I was marrying." Shocked whispers swept the congregation. Angela's mother half rose from the front row, face masked with confusion. "Sweetheart, what are you saying?" her father called. "What's going on?" Angela turned to address the congregation directly. "For 6 months, I believed I'd found the love of my life, a man of faith, of integrity, who wanted to build a future with me, but I was wrong." Pastor Williams stepped closer, voice urgent and low. "Angela, you're clearly upset. Why don't we step into my office?" "Oh, but Pastor, you already know what my concerns are. You've known from the very beginning, haven't you?" Color drained from Pastor Williams's face. "Ladies and gentlemen," Angela continued, voice growing stronger, "the man I was supposed to marry today is a fraud. Elijah Knox is not his real name. He is not divorced. He is a con artist who specializes in marrying vulnerable women to obtain legal documentation." The sanctuary erupted in gasps and confused chatter. "And he didn't work alone," Angela continued, gaze fixed on Pastor Williams. "He had help from someone I trusted completely. Someone who provided detailed information about my hopes, dreams, and desires, so he could craft the perfect performance to win my heart." Pastor Williams backed toward the side door. "Angela, you're having some kind of breakdown. Am I? Because I have photographs of Elijah with his real partner, Rebecca Martinez. Marriage certificates showing he's been married to 4 different women in 5 years. Financial records showing payments made to you, Pastor Williams, for services rendered." The sanctuary went completely silent. "You sold me," Angela said, voice breaking slightly for the first time. "You took everything I shared with you in confidence and sold it to criminals who used that information to break my heart." Suddenly, the heavy doors burst open with a crash, echoing off the vaulted ceiling. Federal agents in dark suits poured through the entrance. "Nobody move," shouted the lead agent, a stern woman with short gray hair. "This is Homeland Security. We have warrants for the arrest of Elijah Knox, Rebecca Martinez, and Pastor Robert Williams." The congregation erupted in chaos, screaming, crying, pushing toward exits. But Angela remained perfectly still at the altar, watching as the scene unfolded exactly as Jamie had promised. 2 agents flanked Pastor Williams, who had gone white and was trembling. "Robert Williams, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit marriage fraud, money laundering, and violation of federal immigration laws." As they cuffed him, Angela felt a strange completion. For months, she'd felt like a victim, a fool, too trusting and naive. But standing here in her wedding dress, watching justice unfold in the sanctuary where she'd been betrayed, she felt something else entirely. She felt powerful. Another group escorted 2 figures through the chaos. Elijah, face masked with rage and disbelief, and Rebecca, sobbing dramatically. As they passed the altar, Elijah's eyes met Angela's. For a moment, she saw him as he truly was. Not the charming, faithful man she'd fallen for, but a cold predator who'd viewed her as nothing more than a stepping stone. "You have no idea what you've done," he snarled as agents pulled him past. "You have no idea who you're dealing with." Angela smiled at him, a smile holding no warmth, no forgiveness, no trace of the naive woman who'd fallen for his lies. "Actually," she said quietly, "I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The question is, do you?" As chaos settled and arrested conspirators were led away, Angela remained at the altar. Half the congregation had fled in panic, but about half stayed, held by shock, curiosity, and concern for the bride who'd watched her wedding become a federal crime scene. Angela's parents stood in the front row, faces etched with worry and bewilderment. The lead federal agent approached respectfully. "Ma'am, we'll need debriefing, but if you'd like to address your guests first." Angela nodded, straightened her shoulders, and faced the remaining congregation. "I know you have questions. 3 hours ago, you came expecting a beautiful wedding. Instead, you've seen arrests, accusations, and complete destruction of everything you thought you knew about me." Mrs. Jennings, who taught Angela Sunday school 20 years ago, stood shakily. "Angela, dear, what's happening? Why was Pastor Williams arrested?" Pastor Williams was part of a criminal conspiracy. For 3 years, he's been working with con artists to target women in this congregation, women who trusted him with their deepest hopes and fears. The congregation murmured in horror. The man you knew as Elijah Knox was a professional criminal specializing in marriage fraud. Pastor Williams would identify potential victims, lonely, faithful, trusting women, and provide detailed personal information so Elijah could create the perfect persona to make them fall in love. A man in the back stood angrily. "Impossible! Pastor Williams served this church 15 years. He married my daughter." Angela nodded sadly. "The evidence is overwhelming. Financial records, documented communications, testimony from other victims. Pastor Williams received $10,000 for each successful match." The silence was deafening. "But why go through with the wedding preparations?" someone asked, voice thick with emotion. "Because stopping them required more than just exposing them. These people were experts at disappearing. The only way to ensure justice was catching them in the act in a setting where they felt completely confident." She gestured around the decorated sanctuary. "This wedding was never about marrying Elijah. It was about creating the perfect trap." A voice called from the back. "So, you've been lying to all of us for weeks?" The accusation hit like a physical blow. Special Agent Morrison stepped forward. "Your former pastor and his associates defrauded at least 12 women across 4 states over 5 years. Total financial damage exceeds $200,000, but emotional damage is incalculable. Without Miss Blake's cooperation, these criminals would still be operating." Angela took a shaky breath. One more revelation would complete the picture. "There's something else you need to know," she said, voice barely above a whisper. The sanctuary went completely still. Angela looked around at faces of people who'd known her since childhood, people who thought they knew everything about quiet, sweet, predictable Angela Blake. "My name is not Angela Blake. It's Agent Sarah Carter, and I work for the Department of Homeland Security." The silence was so complete, Angela could hear her own heartbeat. "I was placed in this community 8 months ago as part of an ongoing investigation into marriage fraud networks. The real Angela Blake moved to Seattle, and with her permission, I assumed her identity to infiltrate this church." She could see shock and betrayal on faces of people she'd genuinely come to care about. "Everything I shared about my life was part of my cover, but what wasn't fabricated was the affection I came to feel for this community. The friendships I built here, the sense of belonging, that was real, even if my identity wasn't. Her voice broke as she continued. I never intended for you to be hurt. When I accepted this assignment, I thought I was going undercover to catch criminals, but I didn't expect to find a community that would welcome me so completely. She looked at her parents, people who had played the role perfectly. Agent James and Linda Harrison, she said softly. They volunteered to pose as my parents, to provide credibility. They're veteran Homeland Security agents as committed to protecting this community as I am. The Harrisons stood slowly, tears in their eyes. We know this is overwhelming. We know you feel betrayed. But every moment we spent with you, every dinner, every potluck, every conversation, those moments were genuine. We may have been playing roles, but the care we developed for this community was real. Agent Carter looked out at the congregation one final time. I understand if you never want to see me again. I understand if you feel used. But I hope someday you'll understand that everything we did was to protect people like yourselves from predators who see faith communities as hunting grounds. She picked up her bouquet and walked down the altar steps. As she reached the center aisle, she turned back one more. Pastor Williams betrayed your trust in the worst way, but don't let his actions destroy your faith in this community or each other. You are good people who deserve better. Don't let their evil win by poisoning the love you've built together. With that, Agent Sarah Carter walked out of Grace Community Church for the last time, leaving behind 8 months of genuine relationships that had become the most complicated undercover assignment of her career.
3 months later, Agent Sarah Carter stood in Grace Community Church's parking lot, looking up at the building where her life had been forever changed. The morning was crisp and clear, with golden sunlight making even ordinary moments feel touched by grace. She was no longer Agent Carter on active duty. The marriage fraud case had been her final assignment before accepting a position with the FBI's Victim Advocacy Program. She would still catch criminals, but now focus on helping their victims rebuild. The church had survived the scandal. A new pastor, Reverend Grace Lean, had spent her first month simply listening to the congregation's pain. Membership had dropped by a third, but those remaining seemed determined to rebuild stronger. Sarah saw Lisa approaching from across the street, carrying coffee and wearing a tentative smile. I wasn't sure you'd come, Lisa said. I wasn't sure I would either, but I needed to see how everyone was doing. They watched the smaller but determined Sunday morning congregation file into church. We got a letter from Jamie Parker, Lisa said. She wanted to thank the congregation for helping bring down the network. She started a support group for romance fraud victims. Sarah nodded. Jamie had become an advocate, using her experience to help other women targeted by similar scams. How is she? Better. She's engaged to a man she met through the support group, another survivor who understands what she went through. Lisa glanced at Sarah. What about you? Dating anyone? Sarah laughed without bitterness. I'm taking time to figure out who I am when I'm not pretending to be someone else. 8 months as Angela Blake taught me I'd lost track of Sarah Carter. They watched Mrs. Jennings climb the church steps slowly. She looked older, but was still participating in the community that meant so much to her. She asks about you sometimes, Lisa said. She doesn't understand everything that happened, but she remembers you tried to protect her. She considers you a hero. I'm not a hero. I was just doing my job. No, Lisa said firmly. Your job was catching criminals. Caring about what happened to us after? That was you choosing to be more than just an agent. That was you choosing to be human. Sarah felt tears prick her eyes. Everyone was concerned about her mental health after such an emotionally complex assignment, but no one had really asked about her heart. Do you think the congregation will ever forgive me for lying? Lisa considered this seriously. Some people are angry you deceived them. Others are grateful you stopped worse deceptions. But most are just trying to understand how to trust again after everything was turned upside down. She faced Sarah directly. But I can tell you this. Not one person blames you for what Pastor Williams did, and everyone understands you didn't have to sacrifice your own heart to protect theirs. Sarah wiped away an escaped tear. I keep thinking about that morning, standing at the altar watching federal agents arrest the man I thought I loved. Even though I knew it was fake, some part of me still felt heartbroken. Because the feelings you had were real, Lisa said gently. Even if Elijah was a fraud, the love you felt was genuine. You're allowed to grieve for that. A group of teenagers burst from the church, laughing loudly. Sarah recognized Emma, a girl who'd confided in Angela about self-confidence struggles. Miss Blake? Emma said uncertainly. Sarah smiled sadly. Actually, it's Miss Carter, but you can call me Sarah.
Emma looked confused, then understanding dawned. "You're the undercover agent, the one who caught the bad guys." "That's me." To Sarah's surprise, Emma hugged her fiercely. "Thank you," she whispered. "My mom told me what could have happened to other ladies if you hadn't stopped them. Thank you for being brave." Sarah hugged back, feeling something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for months. "The new pastor wants to meet you," Lisa said. "She's working on a sermon series about forgiveness and redemption. She thinks your story might help people struggling with trust issues." Sarah considered this. What would I say? Sorry I lied, but it was for a good cause? You could start with the truth, Lisa suggested. That sometimes doing the right thing requires sacrifices that hurt. That sometimes protecting people you care about means disappointing them first. That sometimes the greatest act of love looks like betrayal from the outside. Sarah looked up at the church building one more time. Thinking about all the Sundays in the third pew, all the prayers heard, all the hymns sung while living a lie, but also the genuine community discovered. Real relationships formed, profound belonging experienced, even knowing it was temporary. "Maybe," she said finally, "maybe I will meet with her, but not today. Today I just wanted to say goodbye to Angela Blake and make peace with Sarah Carter." Walking back to her car, Sarah felt something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. Not for romance or easy answers, but for possibility of a future where she could be fully herself while still using her skills to protect others. The marriage fraud network was completely dismantled. Elijah and Rebecca faced federal charges likely resulting in lengthy prison sentences. Pastor Williams had been defrocked and awaited trial on multiple conspiracy and fraud counts. But more importantly, no other women would fall victim to their particular cruelty. That was worth 8 months of lies, worth a broken heart and canceled wedding, and complex grief of mourning a love that never really existed. As Sarah drove away from Grace Community Church, she rolled down the windows and let morning air fill her lungs. For the first time in her life, she had no idea what came next. She was no longer Angela Blake, the sweet teacher looking for love. No longer Agent Carter, the undercover operative playing a role. She was just Sarah, a woman who had learned that sometimes the greatest truth comes from living through the biggest lie, and that sometimes the most profound act of faith is learning when not to trust. The road ahead was uncertain, but it was hers. And that, she thought, as she turned toward the highway, was enough.